It was around 22 hours on May 3rd, 2007, when Kate McCann returned to apartment 5A to check on her children. A second that would change her life forever. Upon arrival, she noticed that the door to the room where the children were sleeping was open more than usual. When she approached to close it, a sudden wind slammed it shut with force, like a premonition of what was to come. When she opened the door again, her gaze immediately sought the little bed where her 3-year-old daughter should have been sleeping. The empty pillow, the pushed-aside sheets, and the deafening silence were all she found. Madeleine's stuffed animal, Cuddle Cat, remained on the bed, a silent witness to what had happened. "I knew," Kate later reported, her voice breaking. "In that instant, I knew someone had taken my daughter." In a matter of minutes, the silence of the quiet Portuguese resort of Praia da Luz was broken by the desperate screams of a mother. "Madeleine has been taken." What happened that night would initiate one of the most complex, controversial, and media-covered investigations in modern criminal history. A missing girl, 2 devastated parents, and a mystery that, to this day, remains unsolved. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscription button now, so you don't miss any of our content about the most impactful criminal cases in history. Praia da Luz seemed to be paradise, a perfect destination for families. But behind this idyllic setting of golden beaches and perfect weather, there lurked disturbing secrets that tourists were unaware of. The quiet Portuguese village was not as safe as it appeared. With a homicide rate twice the national average, the Algarve also served as a route for drug and weapons traffickers. And a disturbing detail, since 2004, authorities had been aware that a sexual predator was operating within an 80-kilometer radius, breaking into apartments at night to attack girls from British families. The victims reported a disturbing detail. The man spoke English with an accent and exuded an unpleasant smell. And yes, 2 of these attacks had occurred in Praia da Luz itself. The McCanns knew nothing about this when they chose that destination for their spring vacation. Gerry McCann, originally from Glasgow, was a cardiologist. Kate McCann, from the suburbs of Liverpool, was a general practitioner. Both devout Roman Catholics, the couple initially wanted to have a large family with 6 or 7 children. However, Kate, already in her 30s, had difficulties getting pregnant. With the help of in vitro fertilization, the couple managed to have their first child, Madeleine, on May 12, 2003. Again, through IVF, Kate gave birth to twins, Sean and Amelie, on February 1, 2005. On April 28, 2007, the McCanns arrived at the Ocean Club, a resort in Praia da Luz, owned by Mark Warner Lentide. They joined other friends who had arrived earlier that day: David and Fiona Payne, Fiona's mother Diane, Matt and Rachel Oldfield, Russell O'Brien and his partner Jane Tanner. 6 of the 9 adults were doctors. Among the 4 couples, they had 8 small children. The McCann family stayed in apartment 5A, located on the ground floor at the edge of the complex, adjacent to 2 public streets and close to one of the pools, with the tapas restaurant on the other side. The apartment could be accessed in 2 ways: through the main entrance, next to the parking lot on Dr. Agostinho da Silva Street, which led to the front of the apartment and which the McCanns usually kept locked, or through a small iron gate on the side of the building, which opened directly onto Dr. Francisco Gentil Martin Street and led to a path at the back of the building. Next to this path was the patio of apartment 5A, which could be accessed through sliding doors that the McCanns usually left unlocked. Thus, anyone could walk down the public street and access the apartment in just a few steps. The apartment had 2 bedrooms. One was used by Gerry and Kate, who pushed 2 single beds together. The other was occupied by the 3 children. Sean and Amelie, 2 years old, slept in cribs in the middle of the room. Madeleine, 3 years old, slept in a single bed. The children's room had a window that faced the parking lot in front of the building, with blinds, a glass panel that opened to the street, and metal latches. During the first 5 days of the vacation, the McCanns followed a similar routine. Every morning, they left their children at the daycare service provided by the Ocean Club. Then, Kate and Gerry took time to relax in the sun, swim in the ocean, attend tennis classes, and go for long runs. Around 17 or 18 hours, the McCanns would pick up their children and take them back to apartment 5A for dinner around 19 hours. The children's nighttime routine consisted of playing a bit, putting on pajamas, having a cup of milk, and listening to bedtime stories. After that, Kate and Gerry would prepare to go out for dinner while having a glass of wine in the living room. Around 20 hours and 30 minutes, they would head to the tapas restaurant, located about 60 meters from the apartment on the other side of the pool. Although the Ocean Club offered a nighttime babysitting service for its guests, the McCanns and their friends opted to leave their children sleeping in the apartments. David and Fiona Payne had a baby monitor, while the rest of the group adopted a system where they would leave dinner and check on their children at regular intervals, approximately every 20 to 30 minutes. On the morning of May 3rd, 2007, 9 days before Madeleine's 4th birthday, the family was sitting for breakfast when the girl asked, "Why didn't you come when Sean and I cried last night?" Kate questioned when and why they had cried, but Madeleine got distracted and the conversation changed subject. Kate McCann later stated that she found it very unlikely that Madeleine and Sean could have woken up between their routine checks because their children rarely moved during the night. However, Madeleine's question raised the possibility that an intruder could have been in the apartment on the night of May 2nd and woken the children before leaving again. At breakfast, Kate also noticed an unexplained yellow stain on Madeleine's pajamas. Additionally, a witness who lived in the apartment directly above the McCanns stated that during the afternoon of May 3rd, they saw a man leaving from the direction of the McCanns' apartment through the iron gate to the public street, taking care to close it silently. That day, Madeleine had spent the morning at daycare, participating in a boat trip that initially frightened her. During the afternoon, the McCanns took the last known photograph of their daughter, smiling by the pool, an image that would soon become a symbol of an international tragedy. In the late afternoon, Madeleine seemed tired. Around 19 hours after her bath, Kate read a bedtime story to all 3 children. The girl fell asleep before the story ended. Her parents gave her a good-night kiss without imagining it could be the last. At 20 hours and 30 minutes after a glass of wine, Kate and Gerry left for the restaurant, leaving the 3 children sleeping. What would happen in the next few hours would change their lives forever. At the Ocean Club's tapas restaurant, the waiters already knew the group of British doctors well. It was the 5th night they had reserved the same table for 20 hours and 30 minutes. The place was quite busy that night, with several tables occupied and staff moving among the customers. The restaurant was about 60 meters from apartment 5A, with the pool between them, which meant it was not possible to have a direct view of the apartment where the children were sleeping. The McCanns were the first to arrive at the restaurant around 20 hours and 30 minutes. Gerald was wearing beige shorts and a light-colored t-shirt, while Kate wore a light dress, suitable for the mild Portuguese spring weather. In the minutes that followed, the rest of the group, the Paynes, Oldfields, and O'Briens, also arrived and settled at the reserved table. The table was positioned in the outdoor part of the restaurant, with a partial view of the pool. The group ordered drinks as soon as they sat down, wine for most of them, and analyzed the menu while animatedly chatting about the day. The waiter would later report that the atmosphere among them was relaxed and casual, with no sign of concern. That might indicate what was to come. Between laughs and conversations, the group placed their orders. Some opted for traditional Portuguese appetizers, while others chose seafood main courses, a specialty of the region. The first round of drinks arrived, and they toasted to the vacation that, until then, had been peaceful and enjoyable. According to detailed testimonies later, Matt Oldfield was the first to leave to check on the children. Around 20 hours and 55 minutes, less than half an hour after they had arrived at the restaurant. On the way, he first checked his own apartment and then, as a favor to the McCanns, stopped outside apartment 5A. Oldfield reported that he did not enter the apartment during this first check. Instead, he stopped by the side window that faced the children's room and listened carefully for a few seconds. Everything was silent, with no sound that might indicate any of the children were awake. Satisfied with what he didn't hear, he returned to the restaurant table and communicated that everything seemed quiet. Dinner continued normally. The first dishes began to arrive at the table, and the group discussed their plans for the next day. Kate mentioned that Madeleine was eager to participate in more activities at the kids' club, especially after the boat trip that morning, which, despite her initial fear, she had loved. Around 21 hours and 5 minutes, when some of them were still waiting for their main courses, Gerry McCann decided to personally do the next check. He got up from the table, announced that he was going to check on the children, and followed the shortest path toward apartment 5A. The route took less than a minute at a normal pace, passing by the side of the pool and through the small iron gate that gave access to the back of the building. Gerry entered the apartment through the patio doors that they had left unlocked specifically for this purpose. He walked silently down the hallway and carefully opened the door to the room where his 3 children were sleeping. The dim light coming from the hallway partially illuminated the room, allowing him to see the 3 children sleeping peacefully. Sean and Amelie in their cribs, and Madeleine in her little single bed, hugging her cuddle cat stuffed animal. Gerry later testified that he felt a moment of deep paternal pride as he watched his children sleeping. He stood there for a few seconds, simply appreciating the scene, without suspecting it would be the last time he would see his eldest daughter. Satisfied that everything was well, he went to the bathroom before returning to the restaurant. On the way back, Gerry chose to exit through the main entrance of the apartment and go around the outside of the complex. Upon reaching Dr. Francisco Gentil Martin's Street by the Iron Gate, he met a British tourist named Jez Wilkins, with whom he stopped to chat briefly about the vacation and how the children were enjoying the resort. The conversation lasted approximately 3 to 4 minutes. While Gerry and Jez were talking without them noticing, Jane Tanner passed by them. She had left the restaurant table around 21 hours and 10 or 15 minutes to check on her own daughter, who was sick and had shown symptoms of vomiting earlier that day. Jane was walking hurriedly, and, despite later claiming to have seen Gerry and Jez, neither of them remembers seeing her pass. Continuing her way along Dr. Francisco Gentil Martin's Street, Jane Tanner witnessed what she initially believed to be one of the most crucial moments of the investigation. Walking a bit further ahead, she spotted a man carrying a sleeping child in his arms, crossing the intersection of Dr. Francisco Gentil Martin's Street and Dr. Agostinho da Silva Street, about 30 meters away from her. In the dim light of the poorly lit street, Jane observed that the man was carrying the child in a somewhat unusual manner, horizontally in his arms, instead of the more natural position with the child's head resting on his shoulder. The child, whom Jane estimated to be between 3 and 4 years old, was wearing light-colored pajamas that she would later describe as similar to those Madeleine wore that night. White pajamas with small pink floral details. The man was walking in the opposite direction from the Ocean Club, moving away from apartment 5A. Jane described him as being between 30 and 35 years old, approximately 1 meter and 75 centimeters tall, with short dark hair, wearing khaki, pants and a dark jacket. She couldn't see the man's face clearly due to the poor lighting and the distance. This sighting would become one of the most discussed and investigated points of the case, until, in 2013, after an extensive review by Scotland Yard, it was determined that Jane Tanner had most likely seen an innocent British tourist returning with his young daughter from the Ocean Club's night nursery. The man was identified, interviewed, and photographed carrying his daughter exactly as Jane had described, resolving at least this aspect of the mystery. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, the rest of the group continued with dinner. The main courses had already been served, and some were already thinking about desserts and coffee. Gerry had returned from apartment 5A and reassured everyone that the children were sleeping peacefully. At 21 hours and 25 minutes, Matt Oldfield and Russell O'Brien left together to do the next round of checks. The restaurant wasn't very full at this time, and the waiters noticed the comings and goings of the group, although they later stated that it wasn't uncommon for parents to do this type of check during dinner. Oldfield, again in a gesture of consideration, offered to check apartment 5A so that Kate McCann could continue enjoying dinner. Unlike the first check, this time he entered the apartment through the patio doors. He passed through the living room and approached the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The door to the children's room was partially closed, leaving only a crack. Oldfield did not fully open the door or enter the room, fearing he might wake the children. Instead, he stopped at the entrance to the room, looking through the crack. Later, he would report that he could see the cribs where Sean and Amelie were sleeping, but could not see Madeleine's bed from the angle where he was positioned. An intriguing detail that Oldfield mentioned was having noticed a slight brightness in the room, which seemed strange, as the windows should have been closed with the blinds lowered. In addition, he mentioned having heard a subtle noise, which at the time he attributed to one of the children moving during sleep. In retrospect, it is speculated that Oldfield may have inadvertently heard an intruder in or near the room. Satisfied with his partial check and believing that everything was in order, Oldfield returned to the restaurant and informed Kate and Gerry that he had checked the apartment and that the children appeared to be sleeping peacefully. Kate, however, would later express her frustration that Oldfield had not fully entered the room to check on Madeleine, as her bed was not visible from the door. The dinner proceeded with another round of drinks. The group discussed plans for the following day. Some were planning more sporting activities, while others preferred to relax on the beach. The atmosphere remained relaxed, without any premonition of the tragedy that was unfolding. Around 22 hours, although the exact time is uncertain, another potentially crucial sighting for the case occurred. Irish tourists Martin and Mary Smith, who had no connection to the McCanns or their group, were walking back to their accommodation after having dined at a restaurant in the center of Praia da Luz, on Rua da Escola Primaria, about 500 meters from apartment 5A in the direction of the beach. The Smiths saw a man carrying a child who appeared to be deeply asleep or unconscious. The girl, who was approximately 4 years old, was wearing light-colored pajamas and was barefoot, despite the cool night. The man was carrying her against his chest, with her head resting on his shoulder and her arms hanging limply at her sides, completely relaxed. The Smiths noticed that the man seemed uncomfortable or tense, walking quickly and with purpose, as if he were determined to reach some specific place. They described him as being between 35 and 40 years old, of average height, approximately 1 meter and 75 centimeters, athletic build, short brown hair, and wearing beige pants and a dark jacket. What made this sighting particularly intriguing was the fact that Martin Smith, in 2008, declared that he believed the man he saw was very similar to Gerald McCann, based on the way the man carried the child. However, this identification was later questioned, as several employees and customers of the restaurant confirmed that Gerry McCann was at the restaurant at 22 hours, making it physically impossible for him to be on Rua da Escola Primaria at the same time. In later testimonies, in 2013, Smith partially retracted his initial identification. Also, around 22 hours, about 30 minutes after Matt Oldfield had made his incomplete check of apartment 5, Kate McCann decided it was her turn to check on her children. She rose from the table, where she had just finished her dessert, briefly said goodbye to the group, and headed toward the apartment. Kate followed the same path that her husband and Matt Oldfield had taken previously, passing by the side of the pool and entering the apartment through the unlocked patio doors. The night was pleasant, with a light spring breeze, and the resort was relatively quiet, with only a few guests still circulating in the common areas. Upon entering the apartment, Kate immediately noticed that the door to the children's room, which they normally left only slightly ajar, was more open than usual. When she approached to adjust it, she felt a draft, and suddenly the door slammed shut, as if pushed by a gust of wind. This unusual behavior of the door made her pause momentarily. Carefully reopening the door, Kate was struck by an immediate sense that something was wrong. The room that should have been dark and silent was illuminated by light entering through the open window. The blinds, which had been left lowered, were raised, and the metal latches, which should have been locked, were up. At this crucial moment, Kate realized the emptiness in the place where her eldest daughter should have been. The sheets on Madeleine's bed were pushed aside, as if she had left or been removed from there, but her favorite stuffed animal, Cuddle Cat, remained on the pillow. Sean and Amelie, only 2 years old at the time, continued to sleep deeply in, their cribs apparently undisturbed by any noise that might have occurred in the room. Kate McCann's world instantly collapsed. Her first thought was that Madeleine might have gotten out of bed and gone to her parents' room, something she occasionally did. Quickly, she checked the master bedroom, empty. She returned to the children's room and, driven by desperation, checked unlikely places such as under the bed, even knowing the space was minimal, and inside the closet. With her heart racing and feeling panic growing, Kate frantically searched the rest of the small apartment, bathroom, kitchen, living room, calling Madeleine's name, hoping the girl would respond. The silence was deafening. It was at this moment that the terrible truth imposed itself. Madeleine was nowhere inside the apartment. The open window, the raised latches, and Madeleine's disappearance pointed to a devastating conclusion. Her daughter had been taken. Kate ran back to the restaurant, covering the path that would normally take a minute in a matter of seconds. Witnesses described her arriving at the restaurant in a state of absolute shock, pale, trembling, and desperately screaming, "Madeleine is gone! Someone has taken her! Madeleine has disappeared!" Jerry's initial reaction was one of disbelief. "She can't have disappeared," he responded, wanting to believe that Kate had simply not searched well enough. But the look of terror on his wife's face quickly convinced him of the gravity of the situation. In a matter of seconds, the couple and their friends were running back to apartment 5. A panic spread quickly. The 4 men of the group, Jerry, David Payne, Matt Oldfield, and Russell O'Brien, quickly organized a search scheme. They divided themselves, running in different directions through the resort and neighboring streets, shouting Madeleine's name, checking bushes, under cars, and anywhere a small child might be hidden. Meanwhile, Kate remained in the apartment. With the women of the group, her emotional state rapidly deteriorating. Witnesses reported that she alternated between moments of absolute despair, hitting the walls, screaming and crying uncontrollably, and periods of cold and determined lucidity when she tried to help coordinate the searches and answer questions from resort staff who quickly gathered to help. Amid the chaos, Kate repeated a phrase that would later become emblematic of the case. "We left her. Oh my God, we left her alone. We left the children alone. My God, what have we done?" The noise and commotion caught the attention of the upstairs neighbor, who leaned over the balcony asking what was happening. Jerry, momentarily gathering strength, to respond, shouted, "Someone has taken our daughter." Around 22 hours and 41 minutes, approximately 35 minutes after Kate had discovered Madeleine's disappearance, Matt Oldfield finally managed to contact the Portuguese police. The call was difficult due to the language barrier, but the gravity of the situation was communicated. A 3-year-old British girl had disappeared, possibly kidnapped, from a resort in Praia da Luz. The first police officers arrived at the scene, only around 23 hours and 10 minutes, almost an hour after the disappearance had been discovered. They found a chaotic scene, Dozens of resort staff and guests had already joined the searches, seriously compromising the preservation of any forensic evidence that might exist. Kate McCann was in a state of hysteria, alternating between flashes of anger directed at the police. "Why did you take so long?" and moments of complete despair. Gerry, although visibly shaken, tried to maintain enough composure to provide information to the police and coordinate the searches that continued throughout the night. As the night progressed, more police arrived, along with sniffer dogs and search teams. The perimeter of the searches expanded, including the nearby beach, vacant lots around Praia da Luz, and all buildings of the Ocean Club complex. Guests and local residents volunteered to help, and until the early hours of the morning, flashlights could be seen moving through the small coastal town as people called out Madeleine's name. By midnight, news of the disappearance had already reached the local media, and the first journalists were beginning to arrive at the Ocean Club, the case that would soon become one of the most notorious and controversial disappearances in modern history was just beginning to unfold. The investigation into Madeleine McCann's disappearance would be marked by errors, controversies, and twists. The crime scene was not properly preserved, with dozens of people entering and leaving the apartment before forensic investigators could collect evidence. Portuguese authorities initially treated the case as a disappearance, not as a kidnapping, losing crucial hours that could have been used to establish roadblocks and alert authorities at the borders. The Portuguese police themselves described their initial response as a complete fiasco. The first major twist in the investigation occurred in August 2007, when traces of Madeleine's DNA were found in the trunk of a car rented by the McCanns 25 days after the girl's disappearance. This led the Portuguese police to declare Kate and Gerry McCann as arguidos, formal suspects, in the case. However, in July 2008, Portuguese authorities archived the case due to lack of evidence and removed the arguido status from the McCanns. Subsequent forensic analysis determined that the DNA samples were inconclusive and could belong to any family member. In the following years, both Portuguese and British authorities reopened and conducted new investigations. In 2013, the London Metropolitan Police launched Operation Grange, a complete review of the case that cost millions of pounds and investigated hundreds of leads. In 2020, German authorities announced they were investigating a man named Christian Bruckner, a convicted sexual predator who was in Praia da Luz at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. German prosecutors declared they had concrete evidence that Madeleine was dead, although they refused to provide details. Since their daughter's disappearance, Kate and Gerry McCann have maintained a tireless campaign to find her. They created the Madeleine Fund in 2007 to raise money to finance a private investigation and keep the case in the public consciousness. The McCanns traveled extensively, meeting with world leaders, including Pope Benedict XVI, and giving interviews to global media outlets. They also published a book, Madeleine, in 2011, detailing their experience and anguish. The campaign has kept Madeleine's case as one of the most well-known and discussed disappearances in modern history. However, it has also attracted criticism and conspiracy theories, with some questioning the behavior and actions of the parents. Despite all the theories, investigations, and twists, one question remains unanswered. What really happened to Madeleine? McCann that night in Praia da Luz? Gerry and Kate McCann continue to believe that their daughter may still be alive. In a statement issued on the 16th anniversary of the disappearance, they wrote, "Police work continues, and we hope, with all our determination, that there will be progress and eventually an outcome. The search for Madeleine will never end. Meanwhile, time continues to pass, but hope remains. Madeleine has never been forgotten." If you like this video, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Share your opinion in the comments about this case that continues to intrigue the world. Until the next video.